Our speaker today is David Allen. He is a GIS Manager. He's also the State Director of Operations for the Texas Emergency GIS Response Team, EGRT, or Texas EGRT as some folks say. And he's also the GIS Manager for the City of Euless and has been for, 28 years plus. Also an adjunct faculty at Tarrant County College and a author of several well-known publications through the ESRI press. And so I'm going to go ahead and let David take over. He's going to be talking about the role of GIS emergency response and how we're meeting that need in Texas. And so everybody will be on mute now, and we'll start the presentation. And welcome and thank you, David.
Okay. Let me wait till you get the mute.
Yeah, give me 1 second, David. I'll mute everybody, but you can unmute yourself right after that.
Okay. You'll have to manually unmute me. I can't find the control panel.
Okay, give me 1 second.
Okay, we sounding good then?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, so as you see the topic, role of GIS in emergency response and what we're doing in Texas to really meet that need. And I don't think I need to introduce myself because I just got a pretty good introduction. So let me first talk about what is a disaster, how are disasters handled. Well, a disaster is something that happens that we then as municipal government or state or local county government have to respond to and manage this disaster. And it's flood events and tornadoes and hurricanes and all kinds of things. Any of these disasters that happen are considered to be a local disaster. The local jurisdiction is in charge. Now, they can delegate those responsibilities. Let's say, for instance, they need to bring in a hazmat team. They can delegate the hazmat response part to a specialized hazmat team, but they're still in control. They always retain control. That never goes away. When a local capability is exceeded, they can then bump that up to the next level of response. Goes up to a regional response, can go to a state response, can go to a federal response. But the locals are always in control. Don't forget that part. For regional disasters, we may see one or more counties that start putting resources into this. And this can be personnel, this can be equipment, this can be money, can be any resources they can bring in. When the regional area can no longer, when it exceeds their capability, then it brings in the Texas Division of Emergency Management. It becomes a state level. Now, they say TDEM. You'll see a lot of acronyms in emergency response. They tell you in the FEMA guide, rule number 1 is don't use a lot of acronyms because no one understands the acronyms, and then everything else is acronyms. So they break the rule right off the bat. So TDEM is Texas Division of Emergency Management. They have 6 regions across the state, and each of those regions has its own what they call disaster district, EOC. That way you're not always having to go to Austin to have the state EOC handle stuff. They can handle it at a local level, and it really speeds up the response. And then local emergency response coordinators are dealing with a local office when they deal with the state. So it's a really efficient way to do that. Texas is the only state that does that. So we have 6 of those regions, and then within those regions, they have disaster districts that are 4 or 5 or 6 counties pulled together. And TDEM has a representative for each one of those disaster district subgroups. So there's a lot of people out in the field to help with these disasters. Now the state and federal is mainly going to be coordinating resources, finding money, finding response teams that can come in, that sort of thing. They typically don't have like teams of 70 people that are going to show up and take over. They won't take over because it's a local disaster. But then as things de-escalate, things start to become controlled or managed, and the disaster returns back to the local level. So it will start local, it will escalate to whatever level it needs to escalate to get it handled, and then it goes back down to the local level. And this map is showing the 6 regions in Texas and a rough population count of each of those regions. And then within that, you see the counties, and those will be grouped 4 or 5 at a time into the disaster district. So each of those regions has its own disaster district EOC, and then in Austin, they have what's designated as Region 7, which is the state EOC. So why do we need maps? Why do we need maps for emergency response? Well, it's an easy sell, first off. All disasters are location-based, right? When you hear, oh, this terrible thing has just happened, what's the first thing that you say? Where? Where did that happen? Show me on a map where that happened so I can see what's going on around it. So it's an easy sell into the emergency management world. More reasons. The command staff is handling this thing. They need a lot of information about what's going on in that region. Where are the rivers? Where are the lakes? Railroads that come in and out, roads that come in and out, property ownership, how many houses is this going to affect? All of that kind of information becomes critical. And we got that. We're the guys sitting on the data stack. We got that. We can also use maps to show where to deploy resources, or also to track resources, so that as something is shown up, you put a dot on the map and note what it is, and then when it's demobilized, you take the dot off the map. Real simple stuff. We can show situational awareness. What areas might be having a curfew or an evacuation area, or what's been affected by the flood, what streets are closed, you know, what's it look like right now? If I have to go out there, what can I expect? And then we can also use these to disseminate information. So shelter maps and route maps of how to get around or how to avoid a disaster. All of those things can be sent out. But then I obviously don't have to sell mapping to mapping people, right? We all know what maps are for. We all understand what those benefits are. Here's a couple of examples. This one on the left was from the December 2015 tornado that struck the Dallas area. And that one is basically just showing the series of maps that was made to cover the damage assessment. And then this one in the lower right was one that we did just recently for the Public Works Emergency Response Team. There's a lot of these other response teams. The Public Works group is a statewide group. There's also hazmat and bomb squads and explosive ordnance, and you name it, there's one for that. But this is showing their distribution of resources around the Dallas region. So if you called for something, they can show you on the map where it sits right now, and from that get an ETA of when it's going to arrive at your location. So there's some problems that exist in doing this type of mapping. And first, and this is sort of the biggest hurdle, is that we need to let the emergency management world know that we're here, that we're able to do this, and understand what the value of GIS is, what we do for them. So we need to demonstrate, hey, I can do damage assessment way faster than you can do it with a paper form, and I can take that data, drop it on tax roll data, and get you a much better damage estimate than you're going to get by volunteers trying to guess what a house is worth. So there's a lot of really good data we can pull in. We need to be able to deploy in an acceptable time frame. We need to be there on site within a couple of hours. I know at some of the disasters that have been happening nationally, it may be a half a day before mapping people show up. And then one of the other issues is it may be another half a day until they have data compiled and can start doing things. So we need to be ready to show up in a reasonable time, have data sets ready, pop open a laptop, and you're going. That's what we're shooting for. We also need better integration across the state to start putting data into the State Operations Center and to any of the affected jurisdictions. So we saw this with the tornadoes in Dallas. It went from sitting in the local EOC making data to sending this to the county EOC, to the regional state EOC, and to the State Operations Center in Austin. And we had to share these data sets back and forth between all these different agencies, so that, because obviously a tornado doesn't respect city limits. So it tore through everything across 5 counties. There were a lot of jurisdictions involved in this, and it was the job of the State Operations Center to get that data into one place where everyone could see it. We were fairly successful on that. There's still some work to be done. I'll talk about that later. And we need to be trained for an all hazards response. Whatever it is that goes on, we need to be ready. Now, one of the caveats with the all hazards response, we can't predict absolutely every hazard. And so we train for the, the real notable ones. And then if something happens that's kind of off the scale, for instance, we didn't have a mapping template with data sets ready for Ebola. Who would have thought? But we took a bomb threat map and used the same data sets because it's still a single point location that's the threat. And you work in this evacuation and quarantine areas and you work out from there. So sometimes you have to think on your feet, but being trained to do the explosive ordnance or bomb squad type map fit in perfectly to then do the Ebola map. The good news is these maps are pretty simple. So it sounds like a real big complex thing, but I guarantee that the maps that we sit here and do on a daily basis as part of our normal jobs are way, way more complex than what we would ever do for emergency response. And in this example, you see it's basically an aerial photograph with street center lines, and the streets are labeled. And there's probably, let's see, there's a containment zone and evacuation area. That's 2 polygons. There's 2 points, one for the staging area, one for the command post, and probably a dozen lines. So how long do you think it'd take you to draw 12 lines, 2 points, and 2 polygons? Doesn't take a lot. And with a template where everything is already pre-symbolized, you just turn it on and go. It makes these kind of things really simple. But the power of this map is that when people walk in off the field and say, what's going on? You point to this and say, this area has been evacuated. And they immediately go, oh, well, I need to run over on Robindale Drive where that where the road is blocked and set up some barricades, or I need to run down to other end of State Highway 121 and check out whatever. So they get information off of this very, very quickly. And in fact, the simpler the map, the easier it will be for non-map people to read and understand. So what do we need really to be effective when we go out in the field? What do we need to be effective? We need GIS analysts. We need people that can sit down with ArcMap and run through this stuff like they've been doing it all their lives. And I think we're all at that level. We're good GIS people. We need the hardware and software that we can take with us, because obviously I can't pick my desktop computer up and drag it halfway across the state and set it up in the field. It's not going to work. So we need laptops, we need portability, we need software. ESRI's helping out with that tremendously. So we're real good on the software front. We need data sets. And we're bringing in a lot of the federal data sets, a lot of the TNRIS data sets, bringing in local data sets when they're available, and we have the room to store them. So we've got really good data sets for our state, unlike many states. And we need the knowledge. We need to know, if I show up in a disaster, what am I expected to do? What are they going to ask me for? If I can anticipate what they're asking, then it makes it easier for me to do the job. One thing that I fight is, and one of the reasons we have to train emergency management coordinators on what we do, is you don't want to show up in the EOC and then get into this question and answer session. Well, do you know how to do a map that shows this? Well, you think you could count? Would it be possible to do whatever? Don't ask me. Tell me. Tell me how many houses are in that. Show me what streets are blocked, and tell me how many barricades I need to block those streets. Just tell me that. I know how to do the rest. I've been trained to do that. So I don't want that question and answer thing. Don't quiz me on what I can do. Just tell me and I'll do it. So that's sort of the knowledge. We need to be trained, and the emergency response coordinators need to know what we're trained to do. Optionally, we can get all the cool techie stuff. So we need internet connections if we're going to be doing web maps and stuff. Now, a lot of this, all that stuff listed at the top, all of that is a standalone setup. So as part of the training that TxEGRT does, is we drop out a DVD with your region's data on it. So you pop open your laptop, put that disk in, and you're going. And you don't need internet connections. And the reason that's so is because a lot of the EOCs you might show up to, they're not going to have like super fast fiber to the desktop style internet connections. And I have been in EOCs before where we turn something on and it brings the whole system down. When you're trying to load 2 gigs of data or download 2 gigs of data, you can bring their system down, and you can't afford to do that in the EOC. So we try to work totally standalone. Now the state and there's some other response agencies can come in and supply a faster internet connection, but you typically don't get that right off the bat. It's usually 6 or 8 hours before you have that. And we need to be effective within the first hour or two. So if we have internet connection, that's fine. Bringing in plotters, projectors, so we can display the things that we're doing, that sort of techie stuff. So why us? Why now? Why is this becoming such a big thing? Well, it's becoming big because the emergency response coordinators, and every city will have one, counties will have one, and then obviously we get into TDEM that has one for each disaster district, and then one for each region, and then the head guys in Austin that handle everything. So there's lots of these guys out there. They're beginning to recognize what maps can do for them. And they're beginning to recognize that we're sitting on the data stack. We got all this data out here that they want. And they don't have another avenue to get to it except through us. So they're starting to realize why we're valuable. Also the ease of the online mapping stuff. You know, I can go into the ESRI dashboard and set up just the coolest dashboard you've ever seen in about 5 minutes. So it's not a big overhead for us to really show amazing, useful apps on the web. I can begin to share that data. So once I put it up on ArcGIS Online and share that, then every other agency that's also involved in this disaster can get that data. It makes it really, really simple and really fast. So that's really coming to fruition now. And then I'm seeing that response teams, like a hazmat team, or I talked to some people that do the dog search teams and the bomb squads and the SWAT teams, they're all realizing that they need mapping. They understand what that value is. And because mapping becomes so pervasive on the internet nowadays, they think they can turn to one of these low-level mapping applications off the internet that you can download for free and then be the map guy. And I make the comparison. It's like the 9-piece Tinker Toy set versus the deluxe erector set with the motorized carousel feature. You know, we got the big toys, and they're trying to use freebie stuff off the internet. They're just never going to hit the same capability level that we can go in and provide, right? Because we're the professionals at this. For the same reason, I don't take my dog in the field to try to search for people. Don't put your dog in a truck and come back and try to do a map. Let me do the map, you do the dog thing, everyone's fine. Call us. Don't make one of your guys who's trained to do something specific come back and try to be the map guy that he's not trained to do. Let me do that. So we need GIS responders that can go on site. Now, I think I've said a couple of times in the field, we're actually not a field unit. So we would not go into the field to do data collection or anything like that. We're an office unit. So we will sit in the EOC with computers. We don't deploy into the field, but we deploy on site to an EOC. Just make that clarification. So where are we today? What's our status today? Well, many of the larger cities in Texas have formed their own GIS response teams, which is great. They're going to bring in people from multiple departments. Typically, their Office of Emergency Management will not have a dedicated GIS person. It's very rare to see that. But they can certainly utilize all the GIS people from Public Works, say, or from engineering, or from planning, or for just an overseeing GIS department. You can bring in all these GIS people, build your own response team, and that gives you a lot of people to call up. So what you want to do is not be in a situation where you're the only GIS guy on site 24 hours a day for 9-10 days in a row. You'll get burned out. And that has occurred. There have been instances of that occurring. So you want to have, you know, if you're going to do this response team, you want to have 8, 10, 12 people so that you're not there all the time. You can kind of set up a schedule and rotate out, get a chance to catch a little sleep and get away from it for a moment. And then these teams can also compile their own local data sets. The value of that is it's hard to do like a statewide data set of parcel information. The data will be so huge you couldn't store it and make it mobile. You're basically going to download that as you need it. But if all you're dealing with is your local jurisdiction, then you've got all your rich data sets right there ready, everything that you need. The next level of that is the Texas Emergency GIS Response Team, or TxEGRT. And the deal here is, and I'll say we because I'll say I'm representing TxEGRT. So we train people to do this. We've already got training classes set up. And in fact, I'm gonna drag in real quick, if you guys can see this. So this is the TxEGRT web page, and this is the training page. And you'll see here listed various FEMA courses. FEMA likes you to have these if you're going to show up on a state or federal level response. There's several of these that you would do. And then there's an online EGRT training class, and then an in-person EGRT training class. And we got one coming up. I'll talk about more about that one later. So we already have those training protocols set up, and those protocols have been approved by TDEM and have been approved by the regional emergency response coordinators to say that, yes, that's where we want you to be. A lot of it is just understanding how a disaster works and what our responsibility is. Who do you respond to? Who's in charge? Where's your desk going to be? You know, what kind of things would you expect it to be doing? That sort of stuff. And we have all of that in our training. We also have ArcGIS and ArcGIS Online available. So TxEGRT is a nonprofit. As a nonprofit, we're able to get ArcGIS software and ArcGIS Online at a discounted rate. And so we have that and have made it available for statewide disaster. Anybody in the state can log into ArcGIS Online account and manage their disaster. We currently have over 130 members statewide. So if we do get in that situation where we're deployed, it's not the one guy for 7 days. We'll typically do 6-hour shifts and put 2 people at a time. So if you were deployed, if members are deployed, they would go in for either a morning or an afternoon, do a 6-hour shift, sign out and go home. We don't want people there more than 6 hours. We're gonna switch off and put somebody else in there. And then over the course of a 6 or 8 day response, you know, you may be in or out for 3 times during that 8 days, but you're not going to be the only guy there, you know, trying to handle it. We've also got the statewide data compiled from various sources, including the federal data sets and the TNRS data sets, and we've built map templates ready to go. So you basically open up one of the EGRT map templates, hand it to the location, and start. So from the time that you get there and open your laptop, it can be as little as 5 minutes before you're ready to start doing some effective mapping. All of that's set up. And then at the top level of this is the Texas Division of Emergency Management. And their Office of Critical Information Systems, Mike Wimet, is in charge of that office, and he's a longtime GIS guy. He's got several GIS people that work for him that support the TDEM operations in addition to the State Operations Center. So they have 2 GIS people dedicated to the State Operations Center, so they handle what's going on. They're the ones that we liaison with on a state level response. It's anything that we would do would be on behalf of TDEM. They also have provided plotters at the regional EOCs. So they've got 6 plotters around the state, in addition to one that's in their, they call it the SOC in a box, the State Operations Center in a box. It also has a plotter. So they can bring in those sort of plotters. They also bring in laptops, and we're working on getting software for those laptops. So pretty soon, shortly, they will be able to supply the laptops and plotters that we would need. So any response, any state level response to a disaster district, TDEM will supply the plotters and the computers, which would be really great. And then our goal is to integrate this whole statewide GIS resource. And we want it from the municipal level all the way up to TDEM and the federal level. TDEM basically, I didn't mention what happens when something goes to a federal response. It basically coordinates between TDEM and the feds. Because feds basically bring in money. That's their strong suit. And so TDEM can help coordinate that. So if it hits a federal response, it's going to come through DHS, Homeland Security, or FEMA, or somewhere through TDEM, through everywhere else down back to us locally. And so we want to have this integration top to bottom, that everyone understands what everyone else is doing. Everyone can use similar or the same data sets. Everyone would be able to share data in a manner that allows it to be easily read by anyone else coming in. We've had issues with some people trying to share data as a map package, and then some trying to put just a shapefile out on the state FTP site, and then some actually doing ArcGIS for server services, and then some putting it up on ArcGIS Online and making that available. And then trying to pull all that stuff together gets to be a real headache. And so we're trying to get some rules in place and do that. And here shortly, and I would say about a month and a half, TDM wants to put together a GIS coordination board for emergency management. And that's going to be hopefully people from municipal and county level GIS response teams, in addition to TxEGRT and pretty much anybody else that wants to get involved with this. So if you have an interest in that, please email me and let me know, and I will get you on the contact list so that TDM can notify you of when the first meeting is going to be. But that's going to help us organize some of this response top to bottom, and that will really help out. So TxEGRT, I've said this a couple of times now. What is TxEGRT? Well, it's a deployable GIS response team. It started as a local group after the space shuttle disaster, when we realized that sometimes there's just things that happen and you got to go help. You know, it's just the right thing to do. You have to go do that. We currently have members all over the state, so we could respond to most areas. There's still a couple that we'd be a little shaky on, and that's why I need to get more members. We expanded in 2014. So EGRT will basically respond to any government agency, any requesting government agency. Now the membership is public and private sector. You don't have to work for a government agency to be a member. And we've got probably 20% of the membership is non-governmental. The other is. And that's important because, you know, as a GIS guy here in Euless, if something big goes on, it's likely to have affected the cities on either side of me as well. And so pulling government people in may be limited because they're busy with their own stuff. So if I can bring private sector people in, that helps us backfill for like a week-long response without stepping on anybody else's jurisdiction or trying to pull them off another job. And so private sector is very important for us too. But if we respond to an agency, we will either back up their own GIS capabilities or come in as a primary response if there are no GIS capabilities there. For instance, for the city of Rowlett, when the tornadoes went through Rowlett, Rowlett has one GIS person. And so we came in basically to back her up. And we brought in some expertise and additional people. And then through I think 3 days that we were there, she was there 2 of the days and had the chance to take a day off and go home and not worry about it and come back and know that we had it handled. And then as it trickled back down to the local disaster, then she took it back over and went from there. But we could also do something if a city with their own GIS response team, let's say, has 20 GIS people, they can schedule out for a long period of time, but they're also going to get into that fatigue thing where not everybody can go all the time, and they may need 3 or 4 people to come back us up. In fact, when we responded to the Ebola response in Dallas, we were handling it with TxEGRT people, and after 8 days of that, we were starting to run out of people. You know, not everyone can do this over and over and over. And so the city of Fort Worth cooperated with us to supply some of their people to backfill some of the other spots. So even though it was in Fort Worth, their GIS team was coming over and helping us out. So that's sort of cooperation. That's what we want to do. Now, if something happens in an area where there are no GIS capabilities, then obviously EGRT would come in and be the primary GIS response. So what does EGRT do? How do we get to this point? Well, first we do the training. And you saw on the website there, the training. Training is at no charge. And I'm going to drag my little training page back in. Our next training is March 17th at the Freeze and Nichols office in Austin. So if you can make that, you click on the little box down there, you'll get this screen. If you can make this, that would be tremendous. Learn all about it. Tells you all about the course and whatever. It's free. Did I mention it was free? Because it's free. People always ask me that. It's free. So come to that. Now, once you go through the training, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to get on the TxEGRT response list. It may be that your agency has or is building your own GIS response team. You want to just come learn what to do? Come on, learn what to do. We'll show you all the secrets. We'll give you all the templates. You can take those back and customize those to your own jurisdiction, get all that set, make your own GIS response team. You don't have to respond with us. Now, there may be a day I may ask you for a favor, but you don't have to go on the immediate EGRT call-up list. In the instance of the Fort Worth team, about half their people are EGRT members and about half their team is not. So I can call some of their people in, but obviously if they got into a situation where they needed more backup, we'd certainly send people in. Several of their people that are not EGRT members have been through the EGRT training. So they know what to do and they have their templates and stuff set up. They just don't want to be on the call out list, which is perfectly fine. I'm 100% okay with that. So EGRT also compiles and builds data sets and map templates. I would say compiles data and builds map templates. We don't build our own data. So like I said, we bring in a lot of the regional and statewide data sets and then set up map templates that are pre-symbolized, pre-labeled, everything you need. Hand it to the location, turn it on, and you're going. And then we support existing capabilities or provide the primary. So if you have GIS, we back you up. If you don't, we're the primary response. And then we have the call-up list. We will deploy GIS responders into a disaster, into the command post or EOC for a disaster. And you basically, if you become an EGRT member, you'll basically say, I can respond just within my jurisdiction or just my area or county, or maybe my county and the next county over, things like that. Or if you can go anywhere, then you say, I can go anywhere in the state. I'm fortunate that Euless is very supportive of the EGRT idea, and they allow me to travel anywhere in the state to do a disaster response. And I'll also say that we've had EGRT deployments here in Euless twice. So it was a great benefit to be able to call up and get 3 more GIS people to come over and help us with a disaster. It's really, really nice. And then we can also provide web-based applications. I'm going to show an example of this here at the end for data collection. And then obviously any of the maps we can put up in ArcGIS Online and share with others is also great. We coordinate with TDM. Like I said, their Office of Critical Information Systems is really the ones that are our handlers, so to speak. So if we go on a state level response, we're acting on behalf of TDM through that Office of Critical Information Systems. And then we're always working on new protocols and new applications and new whatevers for the emergency response mapping areas. So right now we're working on a really nice search and rescue app that'll be available soon. I've been working with ESRI. Well, I'll talk about this more later, but I've been working with ESRI on some of the templates so that they're going to roll these out as the basis for emergency response, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of development goes on as well. Let's see, I'm off the page. There we go. So this is the map that I showed before, and I didn't talk about this little map in the left corner, but right now it is showing the 3 areas where we are able to do full responses. So Region 1, which is Dallas-Fort Worth and 42 counties around there. Region 6, which is the Waco, Austin, San Antonio corridor. And then Region 4, which is Midland, Odessa, out to El Paso. So we have enough members that we can respond anywhere in those regions. What I need to work on is this Region 2, and Region 2 has been a tough nut to crack. I need to get someone, I need to get people interested in taking the training classes, and I need to get someone to host a training class. And basically to host it, all I need is a big room with tables and chairs. I bring in my own laptops. People coming to the training will bring their own laptop. I've got projectors and screens and all of that, so it doesn't have to be a fancy room. But I need a place I can come in and set up and do a full day training. So if anybody out there wants to do that, contact me, please. So let me show you some of the mobile capabilities that we currently have. And this is cool stuff. One of the greatest things is to go play with all the cool toys, you know, and this is one of the coolest boxes of toys out there. City of Louisville got this on a grant last year and have been putting it together over the last 8 or 10 months. And it is their EOC in a box. Now, this is intended to be a full command post. And in that command post, we have GIS capabilities. So it's not exclusively for TxEGRT. It's for any EOC deployment. But you'll see that upper picture in the upper right, they have this inflatable shelter that's like a bounce house. And except the fan doesn't run all the time. I guess it's more like a Zodiac. You inflate this thing and then you close the little valve and it stays inflated. It's this really big inflatable shelter. It's got its own LED lighting and it's pretty roomy inside. I don't remember if they had the air conditioner for it, but it's really cool. And then you see there in the lower left, looks like you know, Van Halen on tour or something. All these boxes of stuff that they bring in, and we'll see a picture here in a minute of what all's in those boxes. But they can drag this stuff out within maybe an hour and a half, 2 hour time frame, and have full mapping capabilities and full command post capabilities. We also have a cooperative agreement with the Salvation Army Communications Truck, and that's based in Arlington, but it can go anywhere in the state, and it actually will travel outside the state, although we won't deploy with it outside of Texas. It would have to be something super major, but that's beyond our region. And as you see, it pulls its own satellite dish, and it's a big microwave dish. So that thing gets a high-speed internet connection that's really nice. It's a dedicated high-speed connection. The command post is mainly for ham radio. So the ham radio guys really could care less about the satellite connection. So it means that the satellite connection is pretty much exclusively for us to do the mapping with, which means it gets really fast. It's really nice. And then you see they also have a plotter on board. We usually want the ham radio guys kind of spread out. We usually wind up in the front where the captain's chairs are. There's a little table up there, and you can put your laptop and connect in on the network. So we kind of kick back in the captain's chairs and work up there. But they can also set us up a outdoor tent, and that's better when you have more people coming to see what you're doing or getting maps or organizing something. And then this is something we've got going for fall. We've got a grant request in right now through the State Homeland Security Protection grants, which is a FEMA grant, a federal grant, and we're real high up on the grant list. It's been approved, but it won't be released until September 1st. So end of this year, we'll be able to start putting this together if all goes well. Fingers crossed, knock on wood. And you see it's got a little trailer, and it's much smaller than the EOC in a box trailer, with the idea that we don't have to have a specialized vehicle to pull it, that about any one of us could go grab this thing, pull it around. And it's going to have its own pop-up canopy. We don't get the big inflatable Zodiac type building, but a nice pop-up canopy. And then inside, we will have 6 laptops, one of these ruggedized plotters, networking equipment, UPS, of course, projectors and screen sharing devices, a generator, and then it will have its own internet connection system. The little box there pictured in the center. You open that thing up, click the box, flick the button on, and it does a cell phone connection through 2 different cell phone channels and a satellite connection, and will get you 2 Wi-Fi setups. 2 different Wi-Fi connection points. You can connect up to 30, I think, on each one. So we would have our own standalone internet, which will be really nice. The idea is that this could be set up in the middle of a vacant field in the middle of nowhere, and we would have all the capabilities that we need to do our mapping. But if we do show up to an area like we're going to be deployed in the EOC, then basically we're just going to pull like the plotter, the laptops, and the networking system and take that in and go to town. So it can be a few of the pieces or the whole thing. That's coming in the fall. I'm really excited about that. So some of the responses that we've been on, we've been on a lot of flood events. this last year and a half or so, it seems like we had the drought for a long time, and now suddenly we have the floods. So we've done a lot of flood events of what areas are flooded, and then count the rooftops, and then match that to tax rolls to see what the values are, that sort of thing. We've had a few times where the dams were full. If you saw that thing out in California where they were all afraid the dam was going to break, yeah, we've had that. We've had that many times. They freaked out over it. It's not that big a deal. But we had one in Arlington where a propane truck tipped over, and it caught fire, and it got enough of a leak where the stuff was leaking out, but not very quickly. And so it was just like a flamethrower that burned for 3 days, and that disrupted traffic. That was pretty wild. And then when the Pope went to Juarez, Mexico, although the Pope's visit was on the Juarez side, from the El Paso side, you could actually see the area where he was. You could see the stage and everything. And so there were big festivals going on in El Paso, and the state sort of mobilized a response team there just to make sure that there were enough restrooms and that traffic flowed and it didn't shut down the interstate and those sort of things. And so we did the mapping operations for that. In fact, we took the Salvation Army command post out there and did that. That was pretty cool. And then we do a lot of the exercises. And this is one of the important things. If you work for a government agency, that agency more than likely has an emergency response coordinator, and they will do exercises. You need to get on the list for those exercises. You need to show up and do the mapping work. And they need to understand what you're doing. That's how you get your foot in the door for that. And then they'll know to call you in when something big happens. And then some of the high-profile ones that we've been on, the Ebola in Dallas, which involved, well, I've got a map I'll show you in a second, and then the Christmas 2015 tornadoes across Rowlett, Garland, and 5 counties. This was one of the exercises, and they did a big regional exercise that had things going on at 42 different locations. We deployed at 2 of those 42 locations. And so you see the various pictures of command rooms and us smiling and waving, you know. The GIS work tends to be really upfront stuff. So the second you get there, they want to see a map and see what goes on. And then once they start handling what's going on, we kind of go to the background and sit around and eat granola bars and drink Kool-Aid. There's not a lot happening. And then it may be that further down the road, something else happens and it kicks off more mapping stuff. But we tend to do all our work up front and then a little work towards the back. And then you sit there and get bored all through the middle. But that's how response goes. This was also for the Big X response, and that map on the left was a web app that we whipped up that showed all the different locations, and then you could click on those and it would tell you who was in charge out there and their cell phone contact information, that sort of thing. And then that picture in the lower right, that's the Louisville EOC in a box. And you have to be a pretty good Tetris expert to get all that stuff out of there and then get it all back in. And this picture was the moment that they realized that they had packed everything except the big case with the plotter in it, and it was about 2 inches short of fitting, and they couldn't get the door to close. And you see the guy up in there on top of the stack. They're trying to figure out how to scooch everything up 2 inches so they could get that in. But the lesson learned was we put marks on the wall now, so the next time as you pack stuff, don't pack it past the certain marks all along the way so that when you get to the end, the plotter fits. That's what exercises are for. You learn those things. This was the Ebola response. So that picture on the top, you see the state trooper there at the front with the big resist-all hat. He's the guy in charge. And this guy in the back row in the white shirt, he was our mapping guy. But we did a lot of mapping for that. And a lot of that was tracking patient location and what patients were being monitored, that sort of thing. The little map in the center bottom, that's the actual location. I've kind of blocked out the address so you can't see that, but they were looking at that to see areas they needed to go and hand out flyers and let people know, this wasn't that big of a deal. And then that one on the right, we had to do mapping from each of the locations out to Dallas Love Field because they were taking supplies back and forth. And then there were some other maps that we did for the hazmat materials transport to take the take the materials from the site to the incinerators, incinerator locations. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff goes on. This one was from the December 2015 tornadoes that went across the 5 counties. The map there on the left is some areas up in Collin County that were hit. And you can, and once again, you see how simple these maps are. It's basically an aerial photograph, the street center line file, and half a dozen polygons that show where the tornado went. So they're not difficult maps to make. And then these two on the right, the top one is the damage assessments in Rowlett, and the bottom one is the damage assessments in town of Sunnyvale. And for each of those, they were doing the paper form field assessments, where you take a paper form and a clipboard, and you go out and you stand in front of the house and you write everything on the form, and then someone has to bring the forms back in and type all those into the computer. And then once they get it typed in or in a spreadsheet, then they give it to the GIS guys, who then have to correct all the misspellings and that sort of thing, and then try to turn that into dots on a map. And so you want to geocode and all this stuff. That's a really long process. That could be in the field for 5-6 hours collecting that data. It could be another 2-3 hours while they type all that data in. And then once they give it to us, it may take us 2 hours to get that data corrected and then get it put up on a map. So you're talking about a fairly long workflow just to get that done. And I'm going to show a solution here in a minute, what we do with that now. This was also one of the Rowlett tornado maps. They have a big water, I should say past tense, they had a big water tower, and the storm picked up a couple of mobile homes and wrapped them around the legs, and they were afraid the water tower was going to fall over. And so they wanted this little evacuation map with a drop zone of where that tower might hit. And then they were going to send people out there to evacuate the area. But if you see from the picture there on the right, there were no houses left in the area, so there was really no evacuation. About 2 weeks ago, which has been more than a year now, they had drained that tower and done inspections and whatnot, and they decided that they could not save it. And about 2 weeks ago, they toppled it. So it's down now. So for future, what's the future of emergency response mapping? This is ArcGIS Pro. So like I said, I'm working with ESRI to take the EGRT map templates and put those into Pro and then make that a standardized map template. ESRI has templates now that are emergency management, but that's the overview type stuff, the dashboards and the county view, that sort of stuff. And they didn't really have templates for the block level. You know, when I get right down to the zone, these are the 6 blocks that are affected. I need the mapping for that. And so they're kind of using the EGRT templates as a starting point to develop these response templates. These are supposed to be out this summer. And in fact, I'm doing a presentation about this, about these templates in specific, at the user conference in San Diego. So if you're out there, make sure you come to that. Make the room look full. But we will eventually be going to this. If you've not worked with Pro yet, first, you need to, because it's coming, and it's coming fast. But second, it's actually much, much easier. Once you get past the shock of the new interface, and of course they moved all the buttons around, but they've moved the buttons around on us time and time again. That's no surprise. Once you get used to this new interface, it actually works really, really well. It edits so much easier. The snapping is so much easier. You can manage your data just super nice. It's really worth getting into. You really want to start looking at it. And then I alluded to this earlier. These are a collector app specifically for damage assessment. And so we basically took the FEMA paper form that they had been using in Rowlett and Sunnyvale and those locations and turned it into a collector app that collects all the same data. Now there's some of the things on there like address. Obviously, if they put a dot on the map and I have tax roll information, I can tell you the address. I can tell you the owner. I can tell you what city it's in. I can tell you what county it's in. So I don't need people filling that information out unless they just really want to. So we've really streamlined this collector app to just ask for stuff that a good GIS guy can't figure out on his own. But you'll also see it's got a search and rescue app. And then once you get into this, you have the choice of doing a damage assessment, a road closure, or a damage action point. And the value of the action points and the road closures is a lot of times these assessment teams are the first non-first responder type emergency response people get into the field, and they may be seeing things that no one else has seen yet, and they can see road closures. And obviously, if you see a road closure and can send a picture of that back to the EOC, then the EOC can immediately tell, is this two guys with a chainsaw gets it fixed, or do I need to send big trucks out or whatever? What's it going to take to open that road? And they know that immediately. We've used this in Euless on a straight line wind event. It was not a rotational wind, it was a straight line. But we used this on house damage and trees that were blocking the road. And we've had a similar type situation about 2 years ago that took us a day and a half to resolve. By using this collector app and getting the information into the EOC that quickly, I mean, as soon as they took that picture, it popped up in the EOC, and we could open it, look at it, assess it, and send a crew to go handle it. And we took what was a day and a half problem before and turned it into about a 6-hour problem. So by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we had it totally done. And that was because this information was coming in so quickly. So we're working hard on getting this out to people. It is totally available for anybody that wants to use it. You sign in on the TxEGRT account. You can sign in there to run the app, to download the data, to make your own map. Whatever you need to do, you can use the TxEGRT account to do that. And there's some other screenshots. I'll jump past that. So how do you get involved with this amazing emergency response group that I've been describing? Well, first, all GIS professionals are eligible. Public sector, private sector, it doesn't really matter. As long as you're good with GIS, man, come on. Well, we need you. You basically do the online training classes that I showed before. There's 3 of the FEMA classes and then 1 of the EGRT classes. Then you need to do an in-person class. We've got one coming up March the 17th in Austin. I'm working on getting one in April in San Antonio. I'm going to be down there for the State Emergency Management Conference. And so I want to do an EGRT class while I'm down there. And like I said before, I really need host sites in Houston. I need someone in Houston to step up and say, hey, I'll host one. And then I don't know if they have regional GIS groups like the Syntex group or the DFW group that we can get the word out and get people to start showing up and go through this training. We really need to have some response capabilities in Houston. And then sign up to support the operations. And like I say, if you go through the training, you don't necessarily, jumped ahead. You don't necessarily have to be on the EGRT list. If you just want to know this for your own use or your own company's use, feel free. I'm more than happy to do that. But remember that we have 2 levels of response for EGRT. One is to deploy on site into the EOC and do the mapping work, but we also have remote assistance people. So it may be that we're sitting in an EOC that doesn't have very good internet capabilities. And so we may call you and say, you know, you're sitting at your desktop with a fiber connection. Can you download this data and then attach this and process that and clip out the area that we need and then ship it to me? Because I may not be able, you know, if I had to download the tax roll data for Dallas County, it could be a couple of gigs, and then I have to attach the valuations to that, which is another gig. I don't know, they're big files, just to get Rowlett, you know, so there may be 30,000 parcels that I need, but I need that cut out of the 1.3 million parcel head data set. You could do that as your desktop and send it to me. You'll get it done much, much faster than I'll get it done in the EOC. So the remote assistance becomes really important. And then you can also, let me see if I can find this, do the Get Involved screen. And I'll show this on the TxEGRT site. We have a Get Involved form. And if you fill this out and send me a little message that says, I want to host a class in Houston, or whatever your message might be, I will get you on the notification list for classes. So if a class forms in your area, you'll get an email letting you know about it so you can attend the class. And that's off TxEGRT.org. Oops, I'm off the page here. Here we go. There we go. So that's kind of wrapping it up, and I would be happy to take any questions.
David, there is a question in the chat window. Can you see the chat?
I'm not seeing those. Can you read it to me?
Sure. It says, Dylan Miller asking, do you utilize pre-existing flood events mapped under the National Flood Insurance Program? If so, how do you use that data in emergency response? If not, what decisions led you not to incorporate them into your maps?
Like the FEMA floodplain map?
Yep.
We have that data available because that's one of the federal data sets that we bring in. We have that data available, and we've used that for things like when we saw that the dam may break, we wanted to see what the contours were and what the flood zones may be. But in Houston, when all that area was underwater, we were basically getting aerial photographs and then tracing the boundaries off the aerial photograph and then going and putting a dot on every house that was currently underwater. So it would be like you were doing field damage assessment with the collector app, except you don't have to wait out in front of the house. You just get it from the picture. And then we took those dots, put them on top of the tax roll, and then that gave us the damage. So the difference between the two is that the FEMA is the estimation of where we think it will flood. And so that becomes very important information in the planning stage. But once the flood occurs, then we need to see what's actually underwater. So yes, we use both those data sets.
Cool.
David, there's a... Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Brian.
I was just going to say there's another question, unless you had a follow-up, Samat.
Yeah, Benny Patel is asking, where can we get a listing of the state and federal data sets you're using?
Okay, if you go to the TxEGRT website, it's all that stuff on the TxEGRT website. So it's the roads, the hydrography, the railroads, I don't know what all is on there. There's a bunch of stuff. And then the federal stuff, I would have to look up what they call that, but I just got an email. I'm trying to see if I can find it. But yeah, if you go to the FEMA website, there's a FEMA website that has the I think it's HLIP or something like that. You go there and it's all the federal data sets. Now I'll warn you, the federal data sets typically are not as good as the TxEGRT data sets, but there's a few things like flood zones and things that you would pull in from the federal data set versus the TxEGRT data set. The federal data doesn't tend to be updated as often as the TxEGRT data. So most of our stuff is primarily TxEGRT data.
Okay. I have a question. I'm looking at your website, and I was curious if you have any public-facing apps that you have created in the past, just for viewing and getting familiar with the kind of apps that you create.
I do not have that on the page yet. I'm working on a page. I haven't made it a public page yet. We've just been testing this collector app over the last month and a half or so. We did some training with it last weekend, kind of work out the bugs. And I want to have a link on here, but I've got PDFs and full sets of instructions, and these are actually things I'm working up for ESRI that will appear on the ESRI website as well.
Oh, okay.
And it's instructions on how to log in with the TxEGRT account and use this anywhere in the state. But there's also a full set of instructions on how anyone anywhere in the world can use this same data set and run it up into their own ArcGIS Online account. So if anyone is interested in that, email and I can send that to you.
Okay. We don't have any more questions, but I believe, Brian, do you want to talk about the quick announcement?
Yeah. I'm going to talk about the announcement of the training workshop coming up. And David, I didn't know, since you're sharing your screen still, is there a way you could pull up the ArcGIS Online just to show one of your maps as a real live demo while I'm doing this?
I hate to do live demos.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I could, but there's not going to be a lot on there right now. A lot of the stuff that we've just done is just exercise stuff. It's not going to look like much. Let me log it in and I'll give you an idea.
Okay, well, we put the link to the upcoming EGRT training workshop on March 17th. It's a Friday. I think the room can easily, comfortably hold up to 40, but it depends on I think that right now it's set up to about 20 people. So please, if you want to attend in Austin, go to the link and sign up.
Okay, so here's some of the things you can see. This was the exercise we did last weekend in Denton. This was the initial damage assessment. This is the basis for that web app.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've also been working on these dashboard operations. But the deal on the dashboard operation, that's pretty much going to be set up. Oh, here's a good example there. That's going to be set up on a one-off type thing. It's hard to set that up way in advance because we don't know what other data may be coming in. So we'll set that up on site.
Cool.
Very nice.
Brian, was there an announcement from Bob Williamson on Encore?
Yeah, I think first I want to thank David for presenting, and really appreciate you having us, taking the time to do this, and hopefully everybody can come in the free training workshop on March 17th in Austin. But Bob Williamson had an announcement to make, and if there's no more questions, we're going to give the floor to Bob for a couple minutes before we get off.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, this is Bob Williamson. I'm with Encore, and Encore's presently, well, we're engaged right now in doing a major LiDAR survey of our entire system. That's we're talking high density LiDAR, about 30 to 40 points per square meter, 16 to 18 centimeter aerial LiDAR. Covering our entire 50,000 square mile service territory, and that includes all of the North Central Texas Council of Government area. What we're presently engaged in a proof of concept, doing about 1,000 square miles this year. We actually have finalized contracts on that, and we're going to be flying those areas here in the next couple of weeks or so. And then following that, come about August or so, we'll be looking at contracting for the entire service area. Right now, we're kind of doing a bake-off between the two vendors. This is single photon and Geiger mode LiDAR. If you know those, that's Harris and Hexagon are the vendors on those. And then based on the results of the proof of concept, we'll select a vendor and do the entire system if we get the go-ahead to do that. Anyway, I wanted to go ahead and make the announcement that to everybody involved to get in touch with me if you're at all interested in, if you have LiDAR plans in the next year time frame. Motivation behind that is I mean, from Encore's selfish perspective, what we're looking at is trying to get put ourselves in a good negotiating position with the vendors. If they've got other users, LiDAR consumers that would be interested in that same data set, then that will help them justify giving us big discount on our pricing. But it also would be something that we could, it's a benefit to you to know that that data is going to be available. But we're looking at the 2018 time frame, starting the acquisition toward the end of this year, and the data would start becoming available sometime during next year. And then we have to wrap up sometime before 2019. If you're familiar with Encore service territory, that's huge. So reach out to anybody else that's outside the DFW Metroplex and let them know that this is something we're doing. We're already reaching out to state agencies and are trying to coordinate, for flood planning and things like that, let other people know that the data is available. But anyway, you can reach me. That's Bob Williamson. And my email address is just robert.williamson@encore.com. Robert.williamson@encore.com. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Bob. Anybody, if you can't remember that, you can send us an email at the ERSF email, and we'll pass it along to Bob. So, again, I want to thank everybody. We're a couple minutes over, and we appreciate it. If you haven't registered, ERS Texas, go on over and register, and we will be having another speaker series next month. And David, again, thank you so much for presenting.
Thank you, David.
All right, you're welcome.